In Counsels on Sabbath School Work, it says we should not seek to imitate Sunday schools, nor keep the interest by offering prizes. So, in order to try to boost the attendance, some Sunday schools or even Sabbath schools will offer a prize, try to get people to show up. But it tells us that we're not to do that. The offering of rewards will create three things that are not good. One is rivalry, envy, and jealousy. As you know, when you offer a prize, you don't give it to everybody. You give it to the one that memorized the most, the one that came to the most meetings, always pitting one against the other. Now, you know, the child may have a legitimate reason why they didn't come. But if we are deciding who gets the prize based on how many times they came, we can't take that into account. And I suppose we tend to think, well, they're just... This evening we're going to study part 2 on the subject of rivalry and competition. Rivalry is probably a little stronger word than competition, but they're both really the same idea. And especially we're going to look at prizes and rewards that are often used. In Counsels on Sabbath School Work, page 182, it says, we should not seek to imitate Sunday schools, nor keep the interest by offering prizes. So every so often a Sunday school teacher or Sabbath school teacher or even elementary school teacher decides to try to get the students motivated, and so they set up a prize for the one that does the most or accomplishes the most or comes the most or whatever, you know. And it is thought that that will be a blessing. That's why they do it. However, if we don't think it through, we might be cursing the children instead of blessing them. And this explains it. It says, the offering of rewards will create rivalry, envy, and jealousy. And so the students, you know, they want to win against the other one. They're not interested in helping the other one to win because they want to win. And it inspires each child to want to win. So that's harmful. And then if they don't win, we have envy and jealousy, which are the two worst characteristics. If you study through the Bible, we see people that got envious, like Miriam. She was envious of the wife of Moses, and she thought that the wife of Moses had more influence than she did over Moses. And as a result of her envy, she ended up getting leprosy because God said, wait a minute, this is not the kind of behavior that is fitting for a leader in Israel. And we could go on through some of the others. So envy and jealousy are deeply rooted in human nature, and we don't need to cultivate those things. We'll have enough battle without cultivating those two characteristics. So prizes, now sometimes a person says, well, I can't see how that's true. Well then, the question is, do you believe that this was given under inspiration or not? If you believe it was, then whether we can see it or not, we have to accept it as true. And some who are the most diligent and worthy will receive little credit. Now, if you remember, last time we studied how God evaluates. He goes by faithfulness, not by the score, but how faithful was that student to study. And some students who are working with everything in them get a C or a D. In God's eyes, they receive top recognition because they really were faithful. They really worked hard. But in the prize system, you can't do that. And it doesn't work in that. So we can see that the right people are not getting the prizes. You know, if we were going to give prizes, we would have to give it to the one that was the most faithful, not the one that got the highest score. Scholars should not try to see how many verses they can learn and repeat. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't learn a lot of Bible verses. What it's saying is that in a competitive setting, we shouldn't be doing that because it motivates in the wrong direction. For this brings too great a strain upon the ambitious child, while the rest become discouraged. So notice that two bad results. The one that memory work is very hard. You know, we have one grandson that can memorize pretty fast, and the other one, it's a job. I mean, and after a week, if you go back, he may not remember it. And so, you know, is it really fair to pit that one against somebody else that's really good? And then you have the ambitious child who really ought to be outside working and getting their education balanced with physical exercise, but they're in there in the books trying to memorize because they want to win that prize. And so the ambitious child ends up not benefiting themselves as far as their health and everything. And then the ones that have a hard time, they just give up. And they say, well, you know, the others are going to win anyway. So-and-so, he always wins. And so they give up. They don't really want to put the effort in that they should. Also in Counsels to Teachers, page 270, it says, more harm than good results from the practice of offering prizes and rewards. So if people could see the whole thing, they would be able to see, yes, it does motivate, that's true. There are a few valuable things to it, but most of it is harmful. So as Christians, we don't want to hurt people. We're not here to harm them. We're here to help them. So, and again it says, by it the ambitious pupil is stimulated to greater effort. Now some people are naturally students and they naturally love to study. And other students, they'd rather be outdoors and doing something physical. But education is supposed to balance those people up. So if we really like the books, we need to get interested in physical exercise and practical activity so that we have a balanced program. And the ones that like the physical activity, they need to get balanced to where they can enjoy mental activity. But in this program of prizes and rewards, the one that already likes to study, they study too much. Those whose mental powers are already too active for their physical strength are urged on to grasp subjects too difficult for the young mind. And I'm not exactly sure what the details of that were, why it says that they were urged on to try to master things that they weren't ready. They weren't mature enough or they weren't balanced enough to be able to master that. But the idea of prizes really stimulates some people to go too far and try too hard. This is an interesting one. I don't know that I fully know how to apply this, but it says the examinations, this is just a continuation. The examinations also are a trying ordeal for pupils of this class. You may notice if you work with young people that a test for some of them is a petrifying thing. And they're very fearful that they won't do good. And it often even hinders them from doing as well as they could do because of the fear that they have. And then, of course, if we don't handle the test correctly, then it increases their fear. And if that is known that they didn't do well to the other students, it's an embarrassment. And there's just a lot of things that come into play here. Now, we try to teach young people, hey, be a good sport, lose without feeling bad, this kind of thing. But that has a downside to it as well. Suppose we develop the habit of losing. Are we going to lose eternal life and feel it's okay? So everything we do has an application to our spiritual life. The habits that we develop in what we do in everyday life, they carry over into our spiritual life. But some really have trouble out of it. It says, many a promising student has suffered severe illness, perhaps death, as the result of the effort and excitement of such occasions. Now, I didn't know these when I was going to school, and I'm thankful that I found it out, but I'm also thankful that I was so poor that I had to work, and because I had to work, I was tired. I couldn't stay up all night studying like a lot of students did. I had to go to bed, and because I had to work the next day. And so I didn't suffer as much as some have. But my sister now, she was a straight A student. I wasn't. But she could not stand to have anything but straight A's. And so she pushed herself so hard that she had some kind of breakdown. I wasn't sure exactly what kind of breakdown it was, but she was never the same the rest of her life. She's passed away now. But it really did her in. And that is, I think, what this is talking about. There's more of that than we realize because, it's hidden. And people drop out and they don't finish. But it says that many a promising student has suffered severe illness, perhaps death, as the result of the effort and excitement of such occasions. Parents and teachers should be on their guard against these dangers. So we ought to be able to see what's going on, and it should be a warning to us to do things differently. In Fundamentals, page 286, it says, in our institutions of learning, there was to be exerted an influence that would counteract the influence of the world. So the world is setting us up for competition, for rivalry, and if we don't know this, we've been involved in it, and it has shaped our character to some extent. But when we come to an institution that is God's institution, there needs to be an influence to counteract that, to where we don't keep progressing in that direction. There was to be exerted an influence that would counteract the influence of the world and give no encouragement to indulgence in appetite. There's a whole list here. In selfish gratification of the senses, but now it comes to our topic, in pride. So a child that can get the prize frequently, it will foster pride in that child. ambition is fostered to really, get noticed and to do things that make everybody think they're great. Then there's love of dress and display, love of praise and flattery. There's another two characteristics that are fostered by this tendency. And strife for high rewards and honors as a recompense for good scholarship. Now, the system that's the worst is the system that the Catholic Church has developed. And they have polished this plan of stimulating the student to their absolute utmost by prizes and rewards and flattery and so on. And for that reason, some of the Catholic schools have the highest, people view them the highest. If they want their child to really excel, they say, send your child to a Jesuit school, because that's their whole system. But there's another side to that we're studying, and it's not for true Christians to follow that path. It says all this was to be discouraged in our schools. So we were to have a different plan. First selected messages, 132. Have not the playing of games and rewards and the using of the boxing glove been educating and training after Satan's direction to lead to the possession of his attributes? Now here's another area that schools are often quite involved with: games. And, we have football, we have baseball, we have basketball, we have all kinds of games. And then there's games that are simpler, but lots of games. And this seems to be the attraction to keep the young people busy at recess time or at other times even as they get older. So this isn't a good practice either. You'll notice it says that it does the same thing. It cultivates those evil characteristics that Satan wants us to cultivate, and in the end, we get spoiled for our work in the church. It's interesting, even in the Bible, it mentions this in Isaiah 1, verse 23. It says, thy princes are rebellious, and everyone loveth gifts, and followeth after rewards. Now let me just make an application or two of this. Have you noticed how people get introduced when they're going to speak? And sometimes, if somebody has 2 or 3 PhDs or whatever, sometimes the introduction is very long. And they're going on and on. Now, suppose that person that is used to being introduced that way comes to Wildwood and we don't introduce them that way. How are they going to feel about us? They're not going to feel very good. They're used to it. There's another practice that I have seen fairly frequent. Some church leader comes into the audience, and the one that's up front sees who it is. And so it's announced that so-and-so is here, and they're asked to stand up, and so on. Now, when they get used to that, and they go somewhere and somebody doesn't do it, treats them like a common person, they don't like that. And there is a cultivation of desiring that. Desiring to be noticed, desiring to have people talk about us. And, there's no end of the applications when these evil characteristics get developed in us from childhood. So everyone loveth gifts and followeth after rewards. When I was just learning to preach, my dad asked me to preach in his church, and so I went there, and when I got there to preach, the conference president was there. And so, of course, I said to him, well, I think you should preach today. He said, well, are you prepared to preach? I said, yeah, but I don't want to preach when you're here. You should go ahead and preach. And you know what he said? No, he said, I'm going to listen today. You go ahead and preach. Now, there was a humble man, Incredible. That really impressed me with his humility for him to do that. Now, here's where this all leads in the end. Great Controversy, page 607. It says, this is talking about those that are true to God in the last days, they will be threatened with fines and imprisonment, and some will be offered positions of influence and other rewards and advantages as inducements to renounce their faith. So my question is, if we get used to rewards, and we are stimulated by rewards, and by given, sometimes we use the word perks, given perks, so that we will work harder and do better, that habit may take some people down the wrong path in the last days. There'll be a reward that's big enough and attractive enough that they'll take it instead of being true to God. We need to be trained so that a reward does not matter. Now, some rewards come whether you ask for it or not, or whether you have worked for it or not, but it's not important. For the true Christian, that's not important. Faithfulness to do the job is what motivates the true Christian. In Christ Object Lessons 398 and 9, when Christ abides in the soul, the thought of reward is not uppermost. Now, in a sense, heaven is a reward. But you can't successfully get to heaven when the reward is the main thing. Then it develops a selfish desire to be in heaven. Moses probably was the best example of how a true Christian will be. He said, you can leave me out of heaven if that will save these people. You can leave me out. Wow. How many people would be able to say that? If the reward is uppermost, there's no way they could say it. So the reward is there, yes, but it is not to be uppermost. This is not the motive that actuates our service. It is true that in a subordinate sense, we should have respect to the recompense of reward. Yes, it will be a blessing to be in heaven. But you know what the greatest motivation is? So that Jesus will have the result of his labor. So that he is not hurt because we're not there. That he is not disappointed because we're not there. God desires us to appreciate his promised blessings. But he would not have us eager for rewards, nor feel that for every duty we must receive compensation. Now there's another downside. If we motivate people by rewards, and then we don't have a reward, they're not going to be motivated. And so they won't put their best, they won't try hard, because there's no reward. We should not be so anxious to gain the reward as to do what is right. That's what we need to train our children and ourselves with. Do what's right because it is right, not because of the reward. It says, irrespective of all gain, love to God and to our fellow men should be our motive. So why do we do it? Because we want to bless our fellow men. We want to do something that helps God with the mission that He has on earth, to take the gospel to the whole world. And the work that He's given us to do is the issue. And we need to be motivated by that. Now here's some other examples of what is often done. Number one, the prize is given for the best or fastest scholar. In other words, if they can accomplish it faster than somebody else, then they get the prize. Or if they score the highest, they get the prize. And this is, you can see from what we've studied, we need to work away from that. The same thing applies in sports. Prizes for the fastest or best athlete, the one that can run the fastest, the one that can do whatever it is the best, they're the one that gets the prize. And so some people in their house, you can see a whole shelf of medals and prizes that they have won because they're so good. And then other people, they don't have any, or maybe once in their lifetime they get one. This is not really the best. And then there's a grading system that compares students with each other. Now, the worst application of this, I don't know whether they still do it or not, but it's called grading on the curve. And so they take into account the worst student and the best student, and they make up the grade according to that. The percentage is not as bad as that, but it still seems to lend itself to competition a lot. And you'll find that students often are involved in a competitive spirit with that, especially if the scores get known or if the grades get known. I experienced that in high school especially. Now, I just want to show you that it's not just the Bible and the writings of Ellen White that tell us this message. So I'm going to read from a writer by the name of Alfie Kohn, and he wrote a book called No Contest, The Case Against Competition. And he's talking especially about education. Superior performance not only does not require competition, it usually seems to require its absence. They undertook the task of reviewing 122 studies of classroom achievement conducted from 1924 through 1980. And what did they find out when they investigated all these classrooms? 65 found that cooperation promotes higher achievement than competition. Now, what do they mean by cooperation? They mean one child helping the other child to learn. And they're not trying to outdo the other child, but they're trying to help the other child learn. Now, anyone that's been a teacher, you know that when you teach, you learn more than when you listen. And so this cooperation between students to help each other learn, they found out that in 65 classrooms, they were superior because they had a cooperative system of learning. 8 found the reverse. Now, whenever you do this kind of study, some things turn up that are strange. And I don't know that they knew why those 8 showed the reverse, but there's only 8 compared to 65. And 36 found no significant difference. Now, suppose the teachers themselves had a big factor in this as to why certain classrooms did well and others didn't do so well. But still, even with all that, 65 found that it was superior to set up a cooperative learning plan. Children simply do not learn better when education is transformed into a competitive struggle. They have all the problems that we read about. And so if you were to take the whole school and pool how much every student learned, they learn much better on the cooperative system. Continuing, the Cooperative Learning Center, of which the Johnsons are co-directors, has started a small revolution in the educational and business world, and has public school teachers and business professionals alike flocking to attend one of their seminars in hopes of learning the secrets of cooperative interaction. So, how come Seventh-day Adventists didn't come up with this plan? How come we didn't write a book on this? We have to go to people outside of our church to find out that this is a better system. Alfie Kohn lists 4 myths regarding competition. Number 1, competition is an unavoidable part of human nature. I've heard so many people say that. When I give this class, a number of people bring up about, well, competition is a part of life. You have to have it. Well, it's true that you got a lot of pressure in that direction. There's no question. But he disproves that myth in his book. Number 2, competition motivates us to do our best. And he proves that it doesn't make us do our best. Number 3, contests provide the best way to have a good time. Well, that certainly hasn't proven true. I told you about what happened down at Oakwood, how they got into a riot because Oakwood lost. But, even though not everybody that gets involved in sports when they lose gets that excited about it, there is an awful lot of pain and agony, and it's not the best way to have a good time. And 4, competition builds character and develops self-confidence. And he proves, it builds the wrong kind of character, but it doesn't build the right kind of character, and it does not build self-confidence. His book demolishes each of these myths and then makes the case that cooperation rather than competition encourages the optimum character development. And more than we realize, success in life depends upon our character. I heard an interesting experience one time. You know how car dealers are known for not telling you the truth about the car they're selling. And sometimes they don't even try to find out what the truth is about that car. They just want to get it sold. Well, this one car dealer, he decided to put on the window everything that was wrong with that car. And of course, some people thought, wow, he's not going to succeed in business because all the other ones are not telling and people don't know what the problems are and they're going to buy. So there's the competitive element. But you know what? His car sales went above everybody else's because people felt that they knew what they were getting and they could trust what he did. You see, but his character, and I don't know whether you've heard about John Wanamaker, but he was the first businessman in the United States to put price tags on things. Before that, you would go in a store and you would ask the price. And if you looked like you were well off, they'd put the price up. And if you looked poor, they might not put it so high. And then you had to dicker with them to try to get it down to a reasonable price. But, often they were able to take advantage of people. And so he was known as Honest John Wanamaker. He put on there, they dropped this part, he put on there what he paid for it and what he was selling it for. And everybody thought he will never go anywhere with his business. He will never be successful. But his sales rose phenomenally. And it actually forced the whole business world to put price tags on their things and stop this dickering. So, where's the character today? That's the problem. And one of the reasons why the character is lacking is because we're cultivating the wrong kind of character. Now, this author was quoted in the book, "The prevailing mode of competition in American culture thus continues despite convincing evidence that it is dangerous to physical, spiritual, emotional, and social health." So it's bad for every dimension of our life. It's dangerous to our physical life, our spiritual life. It's easy to see what it does there. Emotional and social. So, better classroom methods. Number one, have cooperative learning system. Here's another suggestion that, is easier when you get to the older than it is with the real young. But still, I think we ought to seriously consider what we can do to have a list of things that need to be completed rather than how fast you can do something or how high a score you can get. We had an educational system at Wildwood when I first came here. And I don't know all about it, but it definitely had some downsides to it. So it wasn't a perfect system. But one idea that was worked on was that every child could move at their own rate because they had a list of accomplishments, and when they got their list done, they went on to the next thing. When they got that done, they went on to the next. And somehow it was set up so that the child that accomplished things more rapidly could advance farther, and the one that was slower took longer. But there was no pitting one against the other or, making it look like, well, this poor person is slower. So I think that has some value to give study to. Another system I think that's better than the ABC system is using a system of pass-fail rather than the grades. Because, obviously, if they just don't do enough, we can't say you've passed. But when it's pass or fail, we're not comparing the one child with the other very much. Now, I've found that a lot of schools don't like that. So when you want to transfer the credits, you have a problem. Wildwood was doing pass-fail for quite a while, and then they told me, well, the students are complaining when they go to another school and they don't have letter grades. They go there and they won't accept the pass-fail system, and it makes a problem for them. You know, do we have to be squeezed into the world's mold just because of these things? I mean, why do we have to? I don't know fully what the answer is, but I think we ought to be more interested in doing things the way God would like us to, and doing things that will develop the character of the children in the best direction. Oops. And the fourth point that I would suggest, well, okay. If tests are given, now I haven't come to the conclusion that there is, in that statement that I read, I wish that I could find more references to kind of, understand better. But if we use tests, here is an idea. If tests are given, go over the test with the students so all learn the answers. Now, should the question be that the child can answer that for a grade, or is our objective that at the end of the class they know it? Which is more important? Or how can we look at it? It seems to me that if they learn the answers, then that's what we're doing it for. We ask them those questions because we want them to know the answers to those questions. Now, of course, they have to study a lot of other things because they don't know what our questions are. There's some validity there, I suppose. But at least if they all get the answers, then it takes away, some of the feelings that might exist there. So those are just some things, and probably a lot more as you discuss and think about how to put into practice a system that is moving away from pitting one child against the other, and of giving prizes to the ones that excel, and seeking to eliminate all competitive aspects or rivalry aspects from the educational system. And according to what we have read, both from the instruction given to us and from those who have simply studied what the results are, we see that that would be a superior program. Now, it puts you in a different category. We're sending Joshua up to Floral Crest School this year, and they just had a home school meeting. And, they're deep into competition up there with all the other schools. So it's hard to get out of, because everybody else is in it and so on. But I think we need to find a way, and God will help us, I believe, to find a way.